All right, thank you so much, everyone. I guess I'll just quickly start with the introduction and then hand over to my fellow group members to present their relevant slides. I'm great to virtually meet you all. In terms of our presentation from Group Bruner, we were, so all of us in the cohort, we had to look at emerging issues in higher education. Each of our group members looked at different aspects. And when we brought it together, we realized that it wasn't fully planned at first. It actually gelled in well together because a lot of issues that arise from individual disciplines came out. And towards the end, we were able to link them together to look at the importance of and the relevance of interdisciplinary studies. And since we are all teaching at a regional university, the particular importance of Pacific consciousness. So anyway, our group members are, as you can see, Sanjay, Aruna, and I with Eliki and Kolaya. Sanjay did try to join, but unfortunately, Alafua campus is facing issues. So anyway, good to see you all. And let's get straight into it. Oh, apologies for all the bullet points appearing at once. It seems you can't control that on the big blue button. So sorry if the slides seem a bit cluttered. Anyway, basically...
Jason, if you would like the presentation to come like that, if you want it in animation form, then you need to share the screen. And that is why these are the things that I was hoping you had done during your practice session. So when you upload, guys, you cannot, because you have to do it in PDF. It doesn't allow you to animate. So if you want any animation, any video you want to show, you need to share the screen. Over to you again. So you can decide whether you would like to share the screen instead, or you are still happy with that. Over to you.
Thanks. I think I prefer to continue like this because I'm not using USB Wi-Fi. I'm using personal data, so it might get a bit patchy if I share my screen due to the high resolution. Anyway, sorry. So over the years, higher education has consistently been transformed, and you have to also add in the whole faceted aspect of globalization, how world economies, societies have become increasingly interconnected, and this has had profound ramifications on higher education institutions. With globalization, has also come an increase in terms of also come an increase in the demand for skilled workers, and this has meant that you have higher education institutions being more closely linked to labor markets than would have been true historically. So at this present point in time, there is a large demand for, not just graduates, but also graduates who are work ready. So in terms of our paper, we were generally looking at three of our colleagues looked at employability skills, the skills that individuals or other graduates would need to be able to just graduate, apply for a job, and start work on their first day, as opposed to needing further training, mentorship, and so on. And in the course of the research, we did find that, yes, that is quite important, but there are other factors that also need to be taken into account. Because while there is an increase in terms of the demand for skilled and work-ready graduates, the workforce or industry is demanding broader sets of skills, and it's no longer simply adequate to just be an expert in your own relevant disciplines. So there's also pressures right now due to all the challenges that the world faces to ensure that graduates aren't just so tunnel visioned in terms of focusing on their own discipline, but also have more interdisciplinary knowledge or other relevant work skills. So, I mean, as can be seen in USP, for instance, you have interdisciplinary courses being made compulsory, such as the UU courses and so on. Anyway, so overall, in terms of the introduction, we were three of the members looked at employability skills. With one was a general overview of the issue of work-ready graduates, and one was a focus on the need for employability skills amongst journalism graduates, and the other focused on the need for employability skills amongst agricultural graduates. I took a focus on the importance of disciplinary studies, and another colleague took a focus on the importance of Pacific studies. So together, what we're hoping to demonstrate to you is how, yes, there is this huge focus and pressure on higher education institutions to churn out graduates who have employability skills, which is great. But at the same time, it may mean that other important factors such as interdisciplinary knowledge or regional consciousness or Pacific consciousness in the case of our region might end up being undermined or just ignored altogether. All right, so in terms of the literature, I'm happy to quickly go over these first two slides. Aruna, would you like to take the other two before we move on to our sections?
Yes, Jason, that's fine.
Sure, and just let me know when to click next when you're presenting. So anyway, we have had a traditional system of teaching that has, been around for over 100 years. The whole concept of the whole notion of lectures, tutorials, and so on, it's been around for a long time. But with globalization, this has placed immense structures on, popular culture, societal relations, and so on. And that has had profound impacts on higher education systems. So as multiple scholars have noted, this has dramatically reshaped the whole higher education landscape. So historically, you could argue that higher education institutions are very elitist. They weren't accessible to everyone. I mean, even at this point in time, can still be rather elitist due to the high cost of tuition fees and so on in terms of accessibility. But historically, it wasn't something that was open for them. It tended to be open only to those who could afford to attend university. So they were quite elite, and also they had a very elite focus in terms of the fields that they focused on, their research focus, and so on. But with globalization, this has meant that you have globalization, industrialization, there's a huge demand for skilled workers. And so this has meant that, higher education institutions have had to revisit their focus and their purpose. So, there are ongoing debates on whether higher education should even embrace this whole diverse role. There are some who feel that higher education institutions should still maintain that sort of niche elite space to be a place of, high, I hesitate to use the term higher orders of thinking because I wouldn't want to sound snobbish, but where more philosophical ideas can be explored, where sciences can be further advanced and so on, while others feel that the purpose of higher education institutions is to cater for the needs of the workforce. So that means they should be focusing on, profitable or popular programs and churn out more graduates. Anyway, with that, I pass on to Aruna. Thanks.
Thank you, Jason. So I'll be taking on from here. So what we saw in the higher education was that at a point in time, there was a great demand for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and business students. So the higher education institutions shifted their focus strongly on these graduates, which of course was good because it met what was needed. But at the same time, what we also know is that, as mentioned in BICS, that learning is a way of interacting with the world. So we cannot just limit it to knowledge acquisition. So of course, we acknowledge that it's important to get subject knowledge, but that is no longer the main determinant of employability. Okay, so in terms of challenges, we identified a number of challenges. So firstly, what we found in the literature was that actually understanding the concept itself is really complex. So there are lots of arguments on what exactly are employability skills. So a number of terms exist in the literature, and the common ones, some include, for example, generic skills, some call it soft skills, transferable skills, core skills, and this long list. And in our group in Bruner, we had people from various backgrounds as well. We had a social scientist, a soil scientist, economist, journalist, and someone from Pacific Studies. So we all also have very different ideas on what exactly defines employability skills. And in moving on from there, is what is taught relevant? That's another important question. And what we identified in the literature is that there exists this divergence, and that divergence is from students when we compare with employers, and it comes down to course instructors. The perception of what is required in a profession, it does vary to some extent. So many stakeholders, they have their own and different views on employable skills, and Berry 2007 summarizes this into four categories. So his first category is precursor views. So here he views the skills providing the foundation, and then higher education can be added onto these skills. The second category he brings out is complementary view. So the skills actually complement the discipline-specific learning. Or these can be seen as a transforming view. So skills transform your higher education learning. And then we have enabling view, where skills transform and support creation of new knowledge. And finally, there is also this existing mismatch. Even students lacked a clear idea of the concepts, or they had vague or mixed perceptions. And this existing divergence, it exists between students, employers, and course instructors themselves. So all this itself points out that there are challenges, and even if higher education institutes adapt developing these employable skills, there are still lots of issues that need to be addressed. So in response to these developments, of course, higher education institutes, they have adapted significant changes, and some of these include revisions to their expected graduate attributes and learning outcomes, and we have seen that ongoing at USP as well. We have had several rounds of curriculum development reviews taken place. There are significant changes in the teaching and learning activities as well, and curriculum renewal initiatives, as I've mentioned, that has accelerated in many institutes around the world. And we, of course, now we see greater collaboration between the higher education and all the other relevant stakeholders.
All right, thank you. I'll just so basically overall, in terms of our review of the literature and so on, this is sort of a trend that we noticed, because while some group members were looking at employability skills, others were focusing on interdisciplinary studies and Pacific studies. The trend we noticed is, so here historically, elitist the identity of a university was a very elite institution, and that tended to focus on students who were from an elite group. However, with globalization, you also have the factor of commercialization. So all of a sudden, there's suddenly a focus on mass education. So the idea is you need to get out a lot of, trained and highly skilled workers. So this results in the commercialization of universities to a certain extent, where you need to get in more graduates, you need to churn out, you need to get in more students, you need to churn out more graduates to, remain profitable. At the same time, STEM and business studies surge in popularity. So naturally, these become the most popular and profitable courses for higher education institutions. So, I mean, I have my bias here as someone from social sciences, but naturally, humanities and social sciences are losing out, which I feel is problematic. Anyway, so overall, this leads to a trend where you have a large number of STEM and business graduates there to meet the needs of the workforce, which is a good thing. But in the current context, I would argue that with the current all-encompassing issues that the world faces, so our group feels that issues like climate change, COVID-19, they're not something that can be addressed through a single discipline. So what is the role of higher education in terms of trying to produce graduates who have employability skills, can meet the needs of the workforce, but at the same time can make meaningful societal contributions? Right. All right, so moving on, Aruna, would you like to present for Sanjay, or would you like me to, or Kolaya or Eliki? I'm fine with any. So.
Okay, thank you, Jason. I'll present on behalf of Sanjay. So Sanjay looked at developing employable skills for in the field of agriculture. So that actually it enriched our paper a lot, because he actually focused on a particular field. And as we know, agriculture is a very important field for Pacific Island countries. So what he points out is that in agriculture we have a large variety of skilled jobs. It's multidisciplinary. So they can be engineers in agriculture. We can take it in form of a business, communication, economics, etc. So in agriculture, most of the learning takes place in remote form, and in that, he pointed out several challenges that come up if the traditional teaching approach is adopted. So he pointed out that there is a lot of gaps between theory and practice, and some of the reasons for that, as pointed out on our slide, is lack of appropriate training, in existing inconsistencies, incompatibilities. There could be gaps in interpreting innovation, research communications, other inconsistencies in curriculum, and of course, he strongly pointed out the divergent teaching styles as well. So one of the solutions that he brings up is from the work of Sawyer from 2015. So Sawyer proposes a six-step pedagogical evidence-based framework. So this framework points out that the best way in that agricultural field is learn, see, practice, prove, do, maintain. So that they divide into cognitive bit where you learn, you see, and then there's the psychometer bit where parts that are applicable in agricultural studies. So you put that into practice, you prove, you actually carry out the task, and then you maintain it. So it's because of the nature of learning in agriculture. There are lots of practical works like planting, driving, and then processing. There are lots of complex equipment, field experiments, etc. So it ventures into more in the scientific field as well. So he actually used this Sawyer paper to point out how the challenges could be addressed. So the psychometer skills is something that he brought out from that paper. So here first the educator teaches the skills, then acquired, and then they're executed, and then finally learned. So his present day psychometer, he pointed out, it focuses on instructional practices. It also supports complex task-based skills in teaching and learning.
Right, thanks. So now we reach Eliki's part where he shares his insights on, meeting industry expectations, the challenges that journalism students and academics face. Over to you, Eliki. Thanks.
Hello. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry. My apologies. My video is taking too long to load, but it doesn't mean there's anything dodgy happening. But it's just taking long to load. So yeah, for basically for media, as you can see, media, particularly journalists, they play an important role for particularly any involving society. Mahon looked at the critical role that the media plays in terms of in terms of understanding. Without the role of journalists, basically, journalists are critical in shaping the opinion and policies, politics, and also the economy. So journalism is basically about the news and information, and journalists, they get the facts and also how they decide how these facts are assembled, and also they get all of these through talking to people, basically being curious and having the ability to translate all these facts and ideas into simple language. So you cover a wide range of people in terms of breaking down these jargons so that every single member of society can actually get to understand what you're talking about. So journalists are basically known as jack of all trades. So they cover a wide range of issues, as I've said, so from environmental to elections, budget address, and also climate change. Joseph Pulitzer is, so if probably if you're aware of the Pulitzer Journalism Award, so this is the award is named after him. He noted it as a noble profession in terms of its importance in influencing the minds of people. Former US President Thomas Jefferson believed in the independence of the media in order for democracy to thrive. So journalism education. Journalism education is slightly, we've looked at from in agriculture, it's very practical in nature, but this practicality is very much integral to those students who are interested in taking up journalism. In 1904, when Joseph Pulitzer was, he noted that there were separate schools, particularly when it came to physician and various other disciplines. He noted there was nothing set up for journalism, So he felt the need to set up a journalism school, particularly to have intellectual training when it comes to journalism. Basically, what this does is it creates an environment where budding journalists learn not only the practical components, but it's also its theoretical makeup as well. One of the critical things about getting a journalism degree, as Gilmore noted, is that it sets the platform and also a foundation for students looking to go into the field of media. Gaines as well shared similar sentiments in saying that education early on, particularly for journalism students, is critical in taking the step towards exploring the world of journalism and also its ethical components. So some of the challenges that particularly from journalism schools that we face, and not only it's not just confined to us in the Pacific, but it's all over the world. Media companies, they are very much keen on taking on graduates that are experienced. They don't want graduates that just come out like it's only 1 year, 1 semester, but they want graduates that they have been in the field for quite some time. And so based on that, the media companies tend to lean more towards a more practice-oriented model based on the fact that they want experienced journalists joining the workforce. They feel that media courses are not practical enough and they need a lot more hands-on experience for that. So as you can see in Australia, 243 job advertisements, just to put it into context, of the 243 job advertisements, only 1 in 5 job advertisements looked for qualification. The rest, they pretty much looked for experience. And the same thing, but now in the US, now that the proliferation of social media and technology that has taken over, they want a lot, media companies, particularly if you look at the study in the US, media companies, they want a lot more diversification in terms of journalists, not just to be restricted to write news stories, take photos, and that's it. They want journalists to be skilled in social media, web, multimedia, and all the rest in terms of working tight schedule as well. One of the other challenges that media school faces is also the lack of training, particularly for those who teach journalism, the lack of personnel with experience in the field. What I mean by lack of personnel experience in the field, those who have been in the field and have come onto the academia side in order to teach journalism. And of course, the funding as well, which is, I think is across the board as well, and also technical support. So those are the couple of the challenges that particularly journalism schools, they tend to face when it comes to teaching journalism and of course media studies. So thank you.
All right, thanks. This is my particular take on issues and trends in higher education was how, yes, there is a focus on industry expectations, but interdisciplinary studies are still very relevant. So anyway, overall, a lot of this was covered in the introduction as well. Basically, with globalization, you have commercialization, and higher education institutions tend to have a private sector bias. And this means that you will have a huge focus on STEM and business programs. I mean, because those are the most popular, and it's popular for students because they're more highly likely to be able to receive to find employment afterwards. I mean, these are a few examples from the US. In Wisconsin, a former governor wanted to change the motto of the mission statement of the state university. The phrases "search for truth and improve human condition" were supposed to be with "meet the state's workforce needs." In Texas, they felt that they should cut funding to liberal arts and social science programs because they felt it's simply self-indulgent, something you do for fun, and it doesn't actually make any useful societal contributions. So I mean, yeah, emphasizing on STEM and business studies is going to help meet the industry's needs. But the problem is, in the end, we are all living on the same world, on the same planet, and some issues that we currently face cannot be answered by a sole or single discipline. They are all encompassing in nature. Look at climate change, for instance. Yes, you need the science in order to understand how it's going to how fast it's going to, the climate will change and so on, how far the sea level will rise and all that. But at the same time, all these impacts are on humans. So you need to examine and study that element. And the problem as well with these all-encompassing issues is that it is the most vulnerable who will be impacted by these issues. I mean, for instance, the minority rights group, they undertook broad consultation, and they failed to find any English language research about, the impact of global warming on indigenous peoples. 10 years later, they undertook a similar research, and while there had been a lot of improvement, there was still an imbalance in terms of the amount of climate change research that looked at the impact of climate change on vulnerable groups. So that's one example. I mean, and with the current pandemic, that's another example, how the most vulnerable are being impacted most severely by COVID. So, I mean, here are just a few quotes. You can read through those. But the point is that, yes, science is cool. I admit that. I always found it cool as a kid and so on. I mean, not just that you have shows like, Bill Nye the Science Guy, making it so cool and appealing. And of course, you can find good employment. But at the same time, in the end, the human element cannot be overlooked, because if you overlook the human element, it can take us down a dark road at the same time. And at the same time, in order to come up with solutions, you have to go beyond STEM and business studies, because the point is, yes, with the STEM and business studies, you can improve society's understanding of science. With business studies, you might be able to generate the wealth needed in order to address issues, but at the same time, you must understand the human element. So anyway, some recommendations are environmental education. You need that to complement, specific disciplinary studies. But research up till 2000 showed that there's still not much or not enough that had been done. Oh, sorry. There's still. So the question arises on what the role of USP is, because in this particular review that looked at the entire Asia-Pacific region, including our the Oceania region, they found that there wasn't so much environmental education. The bulk of what did take place was at USP. The research found that these were often in the form of standalone courses, such as Introduction to Geography or Introduction to Earth Science or Environmental Studies course. It wasn't really, providing that synergy and showing how it linked what the relevance was between environmental issues and other disciplines. I mean, I'm talking about interdisciplinary studies, and I'm using environmental issues as a case study because, yes, focusing on STEM, focusing on business studies, that's great. It meets the needs of the workforce, but the nature of issues we face, environmental issues being a key example, means that you cannot take a single faceted approach. It has to be a multifaceted approach. So overall, that's my take on this issue. So thank you very much. And I'll pass on now to Kolaya.
Thank you very much, Jason. I believe we just was talking about in terms of how the notion of global interconnectedness and this global citizen, how it is required most higher education institutions to not only focus on specific or discipline-based programs, and also diverse out their programs to other programs that will equip students not only in their specific subject areas, but also in their daily life experience, their daily living. So this is where I believe where USP has adopted this notion of Pacific consciousness, instilling Pacific consciousness to students. And this is through one of the generic courses here at USP, which is UU24. And there are challenges when it comes to developing this skill, developing this knowledge to students, especially, even if you look at the literature available, there are not much work or research done on how of the challenges that students faced when it comes to developing Pacific consciousness, because this is something that is relatively new, and also this is something that not most higher education institutions focus on, when especially in terms of the indigenous ideas or indigenous notion when it comes to higher education. So in terms of the Pacific consciousness, basically what the USP, there's no straightforward definition of Pacific consciousness that USP has provided. The only explanation that it has provided was that it's about recognizing cultural heritage and diversity of civil societies. But for me myself, and for others who are familiar with this concept, for a while, we have come to understand that Pacific consciousness is not, it's not like something that you teach. Like in a classroom, you have to experience that, to know that, you have that Pacific consciousness within you. We can say it's like a vibration, a frequency that whenever you're in a space or, in a place, you just feel that, okay, I'm a Fijian, so this is how I should speak. I'm a Tongan, this is how I should dress. So basically, that is what, Pacific consciousness is about. And that is what we are trying, to instill into students here at USP. Basically, what we can say, in its ideal form, what Pacific consciousness is about, it's, relating with ourselves, so relating with Mother Earth, relating with not only with people in the Pacific, but also with the global audience, and also to consciously do our part, to sustain and contribute to the greater wave of life. And this is what indigenous or Pacific consciousness is about. And developing this this skill maybe, or this concept to students, it is a challenge, because when learning Pacific consciousness, it's not only learning about a specific skill, like a subject, discipline-based skill, like in maths, like in chemistry, like in biology, we can just focus on one skill, and so that you may be employed for those skills. But in Pacific consciousness, there's a wide range of skills that students are asked to learn, or and to develop. And at the end, they will show that through the assessments and through the activities they make out there. And some of these skills I've posted it there is knowing the issues and the context related to the Pacific histories, and knowing the histories of not only the in Fiji, but also in other Pacific Island countries, the history of the settler communities, the immigrants, and all the different diaspora out in the Pacific, and also developing self and collective awareness, and at the same time demonstrate teamwork, effective communication, engage in critical and creative thinking. And basically, just by hearing this, there's a whole range of skills that students are expected to learn or adopt when they finish that course. And they can't really just move on to or graduate from USP if they can't pass the generic courses. So really, students have no choice but to upgrade or upskill themselves with these generic competencies. And there are challenges comes with it. And in the literature, there's in the work of in academia, there's not much research work on the challenges that students face. But we can see that the skills that students need in order to show that they have developed Pacific consciousness, it resonate with the generic competencies that some researchers have been carried out on this. And some of the challenges that has been put out there is that students are not are not just interested in developing generic skills. And for us here who are in a generic course teaching team, we come to understand this. When students come to our generic courses, the compulsory courses, they're just not interested. They we can see it in their face. We know that they're there, but they are somewhere else. And we just know that their interest is not there on the generic competence program, such as Pacific Worlds or U200 or U114. They had no choice but to pass them, but the interest is not there. And even the studies, even though it was done in 1997, it is still relevant today that students are still conditioned, or they're still boxed in that discipline-based learning. And part of this, we can, like here in Fiji, our traditional, kindergarten to year 12, year 13 education, have conditioned students to that sort of learning environment, the traditional approach, where they are focused more on disciplines rather than wide range of skills, or the generic skills that they are needed, other than the discipline based. And also, in students in higher education, why students face difficulties or challenges in developing generic competencies, or in this case specific consciousness, is due to the respective programs. They do not foster a generic skills development. And here it used to be, some cases, some courses we do have that, students, some courses, some programs, they do not have the generic component. They just focus solely on the subject-based or discipline-based. And some instructors in those discipline-based courses, they feel that it's not their duty to upgrade, to develop these generic skills to students. And that's why students might not, in the first place, develop these competencies. But there are also maybe not here in the Pacific, other tertiary institutions out there overseas. They have each, even if their program is engineering or language or any of the STEM subjects, a cultural component has been implemented into their program or into their courses, and just to make sure that students not only develop those discipline-based skills, but also generic set of skills. And also, in the studies, they've also shown that why students face challenges in developing these generic skills is due to the fact they are being introduced to these skills in their later stages of learning. And this is what we find in the U204 Pacific Worlds course, because this is a 200 level course, so that when they reach it's basically at their later stages of learning, and when they do not develop these skills at the early stage, like first year or at year 12, year 13 in secondary schools, they really find challenges when they come to learn this, or develop these general skills, especially teamwork. Those small things like teamwork, or speaking in class, or active participation, or critical thinking, or speaking out loud in the group. These are some of the skills that students find it so they're unfamiliar with these sort of generic skills. And part of the problem is due to the fact that, as shown here in the study, that they do not develop those skills at the early stages. At the early stages in terms of high school, and also the first years of tertiary education. And also, this is something we are most familiar with. Teachers and also students. Some students, most students, especially in the Pacific, we are more, especially kindergarten to secondary school. It's a discipline-based learning, and like Chan has put it, the exam-oriented culture. And this is what students always expect when they reach higher tertiary education, that they'll always have exams or tests. And even from personal experiences, in my tertiary education, I never did any exam or test from undergraduate till graduate level. And it's just, it was a shock at first for me, because I was always used to the exam-oriented culture. Like at the end of the year, I have a mid-semester test, or end of the year test. That expectation for students, some students will carry on to tertiary education. And when they are introduced to such courses that do not require exams or tests, that require them to reflectively write, to critically express themselves, they will find challenges. They will find it very hard. And we have come to understand this for generic courses such as us in the U204 Pacific Worlds. Students have been conditioned to that exam-oriented culture, that when they come and exposed to a different learning environment, different learning approach, different teaching approach, they find it alien. They find it very, very challenging. So this is something we can also think of in our own the specific disciplines. And also, in developing Pacific, the challenges also rise due to its a cultural competence. There's some, Jesse mentioned this, we all have our own personal biases, when it comes to learning and teaching, and students also have their own personal biases. And some of us teachers as well, the studies have also shown that some teachers, feel that, we are being we teach this, culturally or this Pacific Studies course or this culturally relevant course just because we need employment. But at the same time, we do not, have the necessary skills to develop this, competencies in students. For example, most of the teacher training in most higher education institutions, they do not have the cultural component in how to deal with a diverse, cultural group of students. How do you teach students with, with mixed ethnic groups? You will have your biases. You'll have different preferences in teaching this group of students or this group of students. And with that, students will find challenges. They will find it learning. They will see you as a teacher as being unfair. You're being always, towards this group of students. You are, giving them, more reading or less reading. You're giving them answers more, and that biases comes in the teacher as well. And that's why challenges do arise not only from students, but to the approach of teaching from teachers as well. And also, as I mentioned this, not only teachers, not only students, teachers, some teachers are being conditioned to this traditional approach of learning and teaching. We learn about this in the first few sessions about the behaviorist. And some teachers, our learning, our teaching are being conditioned to this way of teaching. And when it comes to teaching this culturally relevant pedagogy, it is a challenge for teachers and also for students. Because for students, in teaching Pacific consciousness or in teaching a cultural competence course, it is a constructivist. It requires a constructivist approach, and students do find challenges because they are more conditioned to a traditional, teacher-centered approach, or in the classroom where students expect teachers to speak every time, and they expect themselves to just come and sit and listen and then go out of the class. That expectations from the teachers and students, and the way their approach of learning and teaching that is more traditional has resulted in the challenges of developing the competencies or the skills needed. And that's one of the challenges we face in Pacific Studies, that we always find. So when we ask students to engage in discussions, in group discussion, to participate, participate in group discussion on peer mentoring, they find it challenging because never in their program or in their course in their high school have they been asked to take a lead in a classroom or take control of the classroom. And this is a more more constructive approach in developing Pacific consciousness. And those students who are more into the traditional ones, they will face challenges. And also this is the work by our own Professor Konai on how most of the Pacific curricula are Eurocentric. We're still following the sort of the colonial education system or the curricula, and that we have emphasized so much on the teacher-centered approach. Even now we have come to understand that we are moving away from that, and we've instilled this course in the university and also in high school, where we are trying to decolonize our curriculum, decolonize our own teaching approach. And this is something very interesting because we're still going on through this. And one very good example is happening now. This is a very good example of decolonizing our curricula, where students are given the time to discuss and to peer mentor and to learn from other groups. And I think lastly is the clash of expectations. This is basically about I mentioned about this when students, when they come in the class, they expect instruction from teachers from the beginning to the end, whereas teachers, when students come, we expect them to be active in participating in class discussions. And with this class of expectations, students will find challenging in their learning. And also teachers, we might be frustrated in terms of not getting what we wanted in a specific class, and this will result in students finding difficulty in developing those skills, general skills, or that cultural competence. And also, some of the challenge, one of the other challenges may result from the cultural biases. Teachers. We come in and we expect a whole participation from class, but the different values, the different cultural beliefs of students might affect the learning and also the teaching of from instructors. Like, for example, in Fiji, for the Tauke culture, silence does not mean that we do not know what is going on there. Or in the Pacific, silence does not mean that we are not participating. Silence is culturally, it's a way of communication, it's a way of respect. And if we understand that small bit of the cultural differences or the cultural beliefs and values, maybe we can understand our students, and maybe we will bridge that gap of the challenges the students face, and not always have a very bad outlook on how students learn. And most of us, we do have these biases in terms of teaching. I think that's it for the challenges in developing Pacific consciousness. So over to you again, Jason.
Thanks. Sorry, Aruna. This is just quickly the summary of Sanjay's part. I'll quickly go over that since I'm going over time. So yeah, agriculture is highly interdisciplinary. So having a one-size-fits-all approach, for many other disciplines, it's very difficult, it's very impractical. But what Sanjay has discovered, and in his discussions with the group, he finds that for agriculture, he finds that the most suitable approach is problem-based learning. So in terms of the challenges that the discipline of agriculture faces in inculcating employability skills, for him, it's problem-based learning through practical experience. In terms of journalism, Eliki, would you like to quickly add on to that?
Right, I'll just quickly go over these. Some of the lessons from journalism is that for Pacific Island countries, the role of the media has never been this important, particularly for developing countries. One of the things that we tend to mitigate some of the challenges is basically job placements, critical in exposing journalism students to the industry realities. Sometimes it may not be as often, as frequent as long as we would like, but we work within the causal line that we have. And also, lastly, it's just the technology and the rise of social media pose a challenge, but also within that, they also offer opportunities for it to be harnessed. So thank you.
Right. In terms of thank you. In terms of Pacific Studies, Colin, would you like to quickly sum up on yours?
I believe I've speak on most of these points, but I just want to, the importance of not only generating specific skills to our students, but generic life skills as well, such as other courses. And a very recently during this COVID, the impacts of COVID, we have stories from villages. So there's people coming from urban area, tourism, people send them back to town because they did not have the skills not to learning how to plant, farming, and or communicating with the village. And these are some of the skills that in the COVID-19 period. But if those workforce skills are not needed, what other skills do we need to survive? And this is where general skills come from. So I think that's really from me.
All right. In terms of ending it up, like this is just two examples. You can read through those, but the idea is that apart from the focus on specific disciplines, students need to be aware of the broader issues that they face. So in this first activity, I guess it's sort of it's trying to introduce students to why interdisciplinary knowledge is so important. This particular activity is one of my favorites for this particular unit because it forces students to look at the science, the economics, the social issues that impact people as climate change worsens. Basically, it's saying with climate change worsening, you'll have more frequent storms and they will be stronger. That means that in order to keep making money, insurance companies will increase their premiums, so not everyone will be able to afford insurance. So it also at the same time highlights how the vulnerable are applied. So anyway, in summing up, what we've generally looked at challenges that higher education faces, we have focused on employability skills, but we have also looked at how, apart from this apart from how higher education institutions have focused on employability skills, there's a risk that they focus on interdisciplinary studies, which are very important on a social for society in general, may be overlooked. Thank you to everyone, and thank you so much for your patience. Thank you very much to all our group members. Any questions?
Thank you, Tim Bruner, for your presentation. I would open the floor for questions. Maybe as others are thinking of a question, I would just ask you to maybe this is a question for and a comment for Group Bruner, not a question so much, but comment to self-reflect as you work on your group paper. Do you think in your paper, when you were looking at the literature, you identified solutions and then you looked at how the solution will be applied to your learning and teaching in order to address the challenge that you earlier raised? Because that was the purpose of the exercise, right? So when you are writing your paper, you have submitted your individual paper, and I have marked some of them, but you all need to, as you are now preparing to compile the papers, or you would have compiled the papers, maybe you need to just step back and see that you have addressed that in your paper, that you identified solutions in the literature to tackle those challenges that you began with, and then you're talking about how you will apply